He didn't reply. You checked your phone 5 times in 2 minutes. You rewrote the message 3 times before you hit send, softened the tone, removed anything that sounded too much, and even added a smiley face to cushion the vulnerability. And now nothing. No dots. No reply. Just silence. It's the kind of silence that doesn't feel neutral, it feels loud, as if it's saying something without saying anything at all. You stare at your screen like it owes you an answer. You wonder what you did wrong, what changed, whether he's pulling away, or if you're just imagining things again. You scroll up through the old messages, rereading his words when he was still warm, still curious, still there. And you tell yourself, maybe he's just busy. Maybe he didn't see it. Maybe if I say the right thing, he'll come back. That's the trap, not the silence. The belief that your words can fix it. That if you just find the perfect combination, if you're calm enough, kind enough, casual enough, you'll unlock his heart like a code. But here's the brutal truth you're avoiding. The more you text him, the less he feels your absence. Let that land. Because every time you try to reach him with another message, another just checking in, another version of I'm here if you need, you confirm what he's banking on, that you'll keep being emotionally available, even when he isn't. You're not crazy for wanting closeness. You're not needy for needing clarity. But you are bleeding power every time you hand him another piece of your presence in response to his absence. And you think your silence will scare him off? No, it's your accessibility that keeps him from feeling what he's truly risking. When someone knows they can disappear, and you'll be the one to close the gap, they don't fear losing you. They fear losing control over you. And here's the paradox. The most powerful message you'll ever send is the one you never type. Because a message might say, I miss you. But your silence, steady, calm, unbothered, says, I no longer need you to make peace with myself. And that's what haunts people. Not a clever text, not an emotionally intelligent paragraph, but the moment they realize you stopped reaching out and you're not coming back, not with words, not with apologies, not with unfinished business, just stillness. Not cold, not cruel, just done. So the real question isn't, what do I text him? It's, what would happen if I said nothing and became someone who doesn't chase silence anymore? Because in the stillness, in the space he didn't expect you to hold, that's where regret grows. Why texting is a trap. Texting feels harmless, doesn't it? Just a few words, a simple message. Maybe if you word it right, soften the edges, make it sound casual, it won't feel like you're chasing. But deep down, you know what it really is. A search for reassurance, a cry beneath the calm, an attempt to hold on to something that's already slipping away. Texting him isn't just communication. It's your anxiety disguised as logic. And the phone becomes a stage where your self-worth quietly performs for validation. Each message is secretly asking, am I still important to you? Do I still exist in your world? Can you please tell me I matter so I don't have to feel this ache? But here's the paradox. The more you reach out to soothe your uncertainty, the more certain he becomes that he doesn't have to show up. Why? Because your words, even the most loving ones, are filtered through his fear. He doesn't hear affection. He hears responsibility. He hears a subtle pressure to respond, to explain, to feel what he's not ready to feel. Avoidants aren't strangers to emotion. They're prisoners of it. When they sense your emotional presence reaching in, their nervous system doesn't interpret that as safety. It interprets it as intrusion. Your message, however thoughtful, becomes something he has to manage. And for someone who protects their autonomy like a fortress, that pressure becomes unbearable. That's why he disappears. Not because your words were wrong, but because your words carried weight. Emotionally, energetically, psychologically. And in his world, love is tangled up with danger. Love has always meant expectations, emotional labor, a losing himself to someone else's needs. So when your text lands, it doesn't say, "I'm here if you need me." It says, "Here I am. Please make me feel safe again." And he can't. He's barely holding his own emotional walls in place. So what does he do? He reads it and says nothing. He doesn't want to escalate it. He doesn't want to lie. He doesn't want to feel anything deeper. So he chooses the one thing that gives him control: silence. And now you're left with the ache. You think it's because he didn't care, but that's not always true. Sometimes people shut down because they care, but they don't know how to feel safely. They don't know how to open the door without fearing they'll get pulled in too far. So they stay locked behind it. And you keep texting, hoping you'll find the key. But you won't, because the key was never your message. The key is something far more powerful and far more uncomfortable. It's your ability to stop performing for someone else's attention. It's your willingness to feel your pain without asking someone else to relieve it. Because the moment you stop using texting as an emotional life raft, you start remembering you know how to swim. And that's what changes the story. You stop needing him to reply. You stop thinking his silence means you're not enough. You stop sending energy to a dynamic that's built on one-way effort. And instead of sending a message, you send something far more haunting: absence. That's what he feels when your name no longer lights up his phone. That's what lingers when your voice goes quiet. Not in anger, not in panic, but in self-return. Because the text you're dying to send is rooted in a fear of being forgotten. But here's the twist: you're not the one who forgets. They are, until the day they wake up and realize you're gone. Not in body, but in energy, in availability, in need. And that's when the regret begins to whisper. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say. The consequences of chasing. Let's be honest. Chasing doesn't always look desperate. Sometimes it's subtle, polished, even graceful. Just checking in. A reaction to a story. A thoughtful meme sent with no expectation. Or so you tell yourself. But your nervous system knows the truth. You're not reaching out for connection. You're reaching out to stop the bleeding. Because when someone pulls away, it creates a wound. And every message you send is an unconscious attempt to close it, without ever asking, what is this costing me? Because here's what no one tells you. Every time you chase, you abandon yourself. Not in a dramatic, visible way, but in quiet, soul-eroding micro-betrayals. You betray your need for peace. You betray your right to be met halfway. You betray the version of you who once said, "I won't shrink just to stay." And over time, this slow unraveling becomes a pattern. You send a message. He doesn't respond. Your anxiety spikes. You spiral into questions. Did I say too much? Not enough? Is he mad? Is he gone? Then comes the overanalysis, the rereads, the emotional time warp where hours feel like days, and silence feels like punishment. And worst of all, you start regulating your self-worth based on someone else's availability. That's the real cost of chasing. It's not just that you lose him, you lose your center. You become someone who performs instead of feels, someone who pleads instead of expresses, someone who manages someone else's discomfort while ignoring your own. And while you're busy trying to keep the connection alive, he's not even thinking about it the same way. He's in control. You're on edge. He's calm in his withdrawal. You're cracked open by the weight of unspoken fear. But here's the paradox. The more you chase, the less he sees your value. Because value is not proven through persistence. Value is revealed through restraint. It's shown when you stop auditioning for someone who didn't even offer you a seat at the table. It's shown when your silence says, "I don't chase what confuses me." And when you finally stop chasing, you begin the most important transformation. You stop asking, "Why did he pull away?" and start asking, "Why did I feel the need to follow?" That's the deeper wound. It predates him. It's the part of you that equates love with pursuit, connection with performance, and validation with proximity. But it's not love you're feeling when you send that text. It's fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of the void. Fear that your silence means nothing to him. But what if you stop trying to fill the void and let him feel it? What if the silence didn't mean defeat, but return? What if stillness wasn't weakness, but a boundary? Because when you no longer chase, you create space. And in that space, he is left alone with the very thing he was running from, his own avoidance. And you're no longer the one waiting for a reply. You're the one who remembered her worth in the quiet. And that is where everything starts to shift. One small thing that changes everything. There's something strange that happens when you stop texting someone who's pulled away. At first, it feels like you're losing. You feel the ache of not knowing, the discomfort of not controlling, the raw silence where your words used to reach. It feels like surrender, but it's not. It's the beginning of something far more powerful, the return of your energy. Because when you stop sending messages, you're not just withholding communication. You're calling your power back from every moment you gave it away. And in that space, between urge and action, you do something revolutionary. You don't chase. You don't perform. You don't ask to be chosen again. You pause. And in that pause, a shift begins. You stop obsessing over what to say and start asking, what part of me keeps needing to say it? You stop wondering, how do I make him respond? And instead wonder, why have I been trying to force connection with someone who resists intimacy? That's when it clicks. The one small thing that changes everything isn't a clever strategy. It isn't silence as punishment. It isn't waiting for the perfect time to re-engage. It's this: withdraw your energy with peace. Not spite, not anger, not manipulation, just quiet removal, just being done without announcement. That's the move. No final text, no poetic closure, no soft threat hidden in the words, "take care." Just you, pulling your light out of the room and leaving nothing behind but your absence. That's the only thing an avoidant feels. Because when they lose your words, they lose your warmth. And when they lose your warmth, they lose access to something they never fully appreciated until it's gone. And the most haunting part? You didn't slam the door. You didn't make a scene. You didn't beg for them to explain themselves. You just stopped offering yourself. And that's where regret begins to form in their mind. Not because of what you did, but because of what they lost the moment you stopped doing it. They expected you to chase. You didn't. They expected you to double text. You vanished. They expected emotional labor. You refused. And now, you're not a source of supply anymore. You're a silence they can't decode. And that is the shift. You're no longer seeking closure from them. You're becoming closure itself. You've turned your presence into a sacred thing again. No longer handed out in hopes of being seen, but reserved for those who know what it means to hold it gently. And if he ever does come back, he'll come back to someone who didn't wait. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started protecting the part of you that keeps begging for love in places that only offer confusion. That's the small act. That's the move that rewrites everything. You walked away, not with rage, but with dignity. And now the space you left behind It speaks louder than any message ever could. Why he'll regret it. Regret doesn't happen in the moment they ignore you. It doesn't happen when they read the message and say nothing. It doesn't even happen when you finally stop texting. It happens much later, in the quiet. It creeps in on ordinary days. A moment of stillness, a flash of your name, a memory they didn't ask for, playing on repeat. And suddenly, they realize something they never expected. You're gone. Not bitter, not angry, not wounded, just gone. Untouchable, emotionally unavailable in the very way they thought they wanted from you. And that's when the regret begins to breathe. Because you didn't explode. You didn't beg. You didn't humiliate yourself trying to win them back. You simply left. Not with noise, but with silence. And nothing haunts a person more than the absence of someone who once held them so gently. That's the twist. They don't regret your words. They regret that they made you stop offering them. They regret not replying to the message that asked for nothing but honesty. They regret watching you slip through their fingers because they couldn't meet you with presence. They regret confusing your kindness for weakness, your loyalty for desperation, your silence for surrender, when in truth, it was your most powerful boundary. And as they scroll through their feed, see your name again, feel the weight of that old thread still unanswered. It hits them. You didn't just stop texting. You stopped waiting. You stopped giving. You stopped hoping that love would come from someone who runs from it. And when the avoidant finally remembers what you were, they'll realize they mistook depth for pressure. They confused your presence with demand. They didn't understand that your emotional availability was a gift, not a trap. But by the time that understanding comes, it's too late. You've outgrown the version of yourself who begged for clarity. And if you ever reply again, it will be from power, not pain, from peace, not pursuit. Because here's the final truth. The text you never send is the moment you reclaim yourself. And the version of you that was once so afraid to be silent, she's gone too. She was never weak. She was just still learning that love doesn't have to chase to be real. So now the question isn't, will he come back? It's, will you still be reachable when he does? Because healing isn't about revenge. It's about returning to yourself so completely that the thought of begging for crumbs again feels like a life that no longer fits. If this message found you in a moment of emotional collapse, let it be the last day you chase silence with words. You are not meant to earn what should be given freely. You are not hard to love. You were just loving in a place that never learned how to hold something sacred. So here's your challenge. Don't text him. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not until he's earned access to the version of you who finally stopped apologizing for needing reciprocity. The version of you who finally chose peace over performance.